What's going on, guys? In this video, we're getting into 10 life-changing quotes. Be sure to stick around to the end. I think number 9 is my personal favorite. Before we get into that, my name's Keith. I made this channel to help men create their ideal lives through self-mastery. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you don't miss tomorrow's video, and let's get into it. All right, guys, the first quote is, "The obstacle is the way." I'm giving this quote to Ryan Holiday, the author of the book, "The Obstacle is the Way." I'm not sure if he was actually the original person to say it, but this is the person that I got this quote from. And the reason I like this quote is because it helps you reframe the understanding of obstacles and realize that they are part of the process rather than something to avoid. Too often in our lives, we run into an obstacle and we think we've gone the wrong way, but we need to learn to understand that an obstacle is just part of the process and there's no getting around that. You're going to have to go through obstacles in order to be a success. That's why I like this quote. When I run into an obstacle, I remind myself that the obstacle is the way, and rather than looking for a way to give up, I look for a solution to the problem and get around it and keep it moving. The second quote, "I would rather live a short life of glory than a long one of obscurity," from Alexander the Great. Most of my favorite quotes are quotes that have to do with the call to adventure and doing something important with your life, because that just fires me up in particular. But I like this quote because I think it's true. I would rather go out in a blaze of glory personally and do something really impactful in the world than live a long life where I'm not remembered and I don't do anything impactful. Those kinds of lives, personally, I don't find them to be that meaningful. I'm not saying that your life's a waste if you're not President of the United States or Alexander the Great or something like that, but I'm just saying that going out there and doing something great with your life and being inspired to do that is far better than living some long, safe, secure life where you just don't really do anything important. All right, guys, the third quote, "Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today." This is a Jordan Peterson quote. I like this quote because in our social media era, it is so easy to think that you're falling behind and that other people are just kicking your butt. And that's why it's really important to focus on who you were yesterday, because here's the thing, you have no idea what these social media people have been doing with their lives. You have no idea what they're actually like off camera. Of course, they're showing you their smiling faces and how happy they are and how great their lives are, but they're only taking pictures when they're on vacation, and they're only taking pictures when they go out and stuff like that. They're not taking pictures when they're crying in their bed because their life sucks or something like that, or they're not telling you about the fact that they're on prescription medication because they're depressed and things like that. So comparing yourself to these people leaves you in a bad spot. And also, you might think you know something about somebody. Maybe you look at somebody like, gee, they've got a lot of money, they're just kicking my butt, but the only thing you're seeing is how much money they've got. You have no idea what their relationships are like, if they're happy with their life or anything. You just know this one thing. So it's important to compare yourself to who you were yesterday and focus on continual growth rather than trying to compete with people today, because it's such an unfulfilling process to try and compete with other people. Fourth quote, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach to hell." This is a Carl Jung quote. Carl Jung was a psychoanalyst in the Freud line. And I like this quote. It works on two different levels. It works psychologically to say that in order to really understand yourself, you have to realize all the things about yourself that you don't want to admit. There's so much about ourselves that we don't want to admit to ourselves about ourselves, and that's why we kind of go through life very unconsciously. This is really telling if you have a lot of patterns that reoccur in your life. That means there's things in yourself that you're not really addressing about yourself, and they keep coming up in your life for you to experience them. A lot of times this happens in relationships. Some people have it with money. They might get money and then lose money, and it's because you're not self-aware and you haven't figured out something about yourself that you need to discover so you can get past that pattern and get on to living a happy life. This quote also works on another level. It works on the level of the call to adventure again. In order to reach that place you want to be in life, you're going to have to go through a lot of shit, and that's just how it is. And so many people go off on the call to adventure in their own life, and they think that it's just going to be this super easy, fun process where, they're going to think like in a year's time, they're going to have everything they ever wanted and they didn't have to go through anything. And that's just not how it goes. In order to get where you want to go, you're just going to have to go through a lot of stuff. And in that stuff you go through, that's where the growth and development happens. People fear having to grow and develop as individuals. They just want to get all the stuff they want. They don't want to have the personal psychological transformation along the way that is required. I was just like this, and in the middle of my call to adventure process and really having to purge a lot out of myself and change as an individual in order to become who I wanted to become, I really wished I had not gone on this adventure, but I can tell you once you get through it, your life's just way better. You're way happier with you have more clarity, and you're set up on the right path. But like it says, no tree can go to heaven unless its roots reach to hell. In other words, you can't get where you want to go in life unless you're willing to go through the pain and the process to get there. The fifth quote, I think everyone's heard this one: cowards die many times before their deaths. Julius Caesar. Again, another sort of call to adventure kind of quote. If you're not willing to be courageous in your life, you're going to spend a lot of time wishing you were dead, quite honestly. The people that you see in your life who seem like they're alive, but they might as well be dead kind of people who just, there's no like spark to them. There's no energy behind these people. It's those people who just were not courageous enough to take chances in their lives. Like, I mean, of course, in order to take these courageous events, a lot of danger is going to come along with that. That's part of it. But in that, you grow, you develop, and you become who you're meant to be. And that spark of life, it stays within you. If you keep saying no to the opportunities to be courageous and to pursue what's meaningful to you, it's in a way like a psychological form of death. You have rejected the opportunity to live completely when you give in to cowardice rather than being courageous in the path and pursuit of your goals. Guys, I was thinking about also doing a video on 10 of my favorite song lyrics that I think are really inspirational and could help you out in your life. If you'd like me to make that video soon, leave the comment lyrics down below and I'll add that to the list of videos to make. Alright, so the sixth quote is, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. This is a Steve Jobs quote. He said this at the Stanford commencement address that he gave. I love this quote because, again, along with the call to adventure, part of the call to adventure is the fact that along the way you just feel like you feel like something's perhaps leading you, but you don't exactly know where it's leading you. I feel this a lot of times when and you'll know it in yourself too if you know what to look for. It's that feeling that compels you to do something, that inspired action towards something. It feels like something's guiding you along. It's like, hey, do this, and if you keep following those impulses correctly, it kind of leads you down this path. But the point of Steve Jobs' quote is, you don't exactly know where you're going when you're doing this. He was a guy, if you really learn about him, which I've spent a lot of time learning about him, he was a guy who did follow those impulses. He just kind of had faith in life to work itself out for his best interest, and so he went all over the place. Like, one thing that he did was he ended up living for a month in India, and this was before India had become a technologically advanced society, and they still were basically a third world nation. And he said the people there didn't rely on their intellect, they relied on their intuition for things. And he said that he took that experience and applied it to creating products at Apple. He would have a very intuitive approach, and you can see it in the design of the product. It's very intuitive. It doesn't look like something that a tech geek engineer kind of person makes. It's very aesthetically pleasing. And he didn't go to India with the intention of making Apple products better. The idea of Apple hadn't even crossed his mind yet at this point. But he went to India, and that ended up being an integral part of how he made products and how his life turned out. And that's the idea, is when you look back on your life, moments where you chose to do something, oftentimes it's when you get out of your comfort zone. Those things will have impacts that you really do not expect them to have, and they will completely change your life. And you can see those dots being connected looking backwards. Personal example in my own life, one of the first times I ever chose to get out of my comfort zone was to play football my senior year in high school. And I was awful at football. I was completely self-conscious. I just didn't know how to get out of my head and play and be comfortable out there. And so my idea of what was going to happen, which was I was going to go out here and I was going to be a good football player and have a good time, didn't happen. But the other things that happened, people I met that I became friends with for several years and spent a lot of time with, the experiences I gained from doing this, getting out of my comfort zone and learning that I could do that, all the different things, like I probably wouldn't have experienced the process of like drinking and doing all these things that perhaps they weren't necessarily great for me, but it was great to go through those experiences so that I could come out on the other side a different person. A lot of different things happened because I chose to do that. I chose to get out of my comfort zone, and as I look back on my life, a lot of times I can see where that choice has led me to where I am today. And that's what it's about. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You don't know how things are going to play out, but looking back, it feels like something's basically been guiding you down the path and you didn't quite understand it. And it's a real spooky feeling, honestly. The seventh quote, the purpose of life is finding the largest burden you can bear and bearing it. Another Jordan Peterson quote. I love this quote because people love to shirk responsibility, but the thing is, the responsibility is what gives your life meaning. If you don't take responsibility for things, then you become a victim of them, right? If you're not willing to take accountability for yourself, that means you're blaming it on something outside of yourself, and in that victim state, you feel completely unhappy, you feel resentful, you feel nihilistic. If you take responsibility for yourself, yourself. You have meaning. You have a reason to get up. And then once you've gotten yourself under control, try taking responsibility for the people around you and how you can have a positive impact on their life, and then your community at large, and then the country and the world, all these different things, and put them all under your responsibility. Bear that burden, and your life gets more and more meaningful. If you've ever watched Jordan Peterson, you can tell that he takes this very seriously, because he, especially towards, he hasn't been doing a lot of speaking lately at all, but towards the end of his speaking tours he was going on, you could tell he was very emotional about everything he was doing, because he was taking on a massive responsibility for trying to orient the entire Western world in a positive direction, and he felt very inspired and very compelled in that. You could tell it meant a lot to him, and it gave his life so much meaning. And if you can do that in your own life, you don't have to be Jordan Peterson, but just start taking responsibility for things. You will become much happier. And people love to avoid responsibility because they think it comes with some requirement to do something, but in that, essentially it's the same thing as choosing pleasure over purpose, which I talked about in yesterday's video being a bad thing to do. Picking up the burden is like choosing your purpose rather than choosing pleasure that doesn't mean anything to you. All right, the 8th quote: the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. I love this quote because it's talking about what you think about is going to dictate the way you behave in the world, the way you treat other people, what you see in the world. If you're an angry person, you're going to see a lot of reasons to be angry, and you're going to make a lot of people angry, and life is basically just going to keep feeding that back to you. If you choose to go out and give love to people, be positive, be a good, impactful person in the world, these things are going to come back to you, and it's going to change the way you see the world around you. Literally, the color of the world is going to feel different when you're angry versus when you're happy versus when you're sad, depressed, overjoyed, all these things. The emotions and the thoughts you think are going to drive the way your life works. So it's extremely important to focus on thoughts, think the right thoughts, stop thinking thoughts that don't help you, are not constructive, and to really focus on positives, focus on what you want, focus on how you can have an impact. The world will look completely different to you. That's why I really like this quote. All right, the 9th quote: if freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. This is a George Washington quote. I thought this was apropos for the time because we got a lot of crazy people out there who are trying to cancel culture everybody they disagree with, and it's just an awful thing. And in times like this, speaking the truth is a courageous act, and it's extremely important that we have the courage to speak our truth, because otherwise we're going to get led down a path that I think we all deep down know doesn't make any sense. I mean, look at the divides that are happening, especially in America, but in the Western world in general. So much divide is happening amongst people, and we're getting told to believe a bunch of stuff that most people deep down know isn't true. We've spent the last four months being told to lock away in our houses and hide from each other, and then suddenly there's riots on the streets, and all of a sudden that's okay, you know? Like, they're trying to get us to believe things, and if you say anything contradictory to the popular narrative, they're censoring people, taking them off social media platforms. You get attacked by mobs, right? George Washington and all the founders, the reason that the First Amendment gives you freedom of speech is because they understood how important it was to be able to speak your truth. Whether or not you're right or wrong, you have the right to speak what you want to speak, because if you can't say what you want to say, then basically you can't think what you want to think, because speech dictates thought. If you don't hear if you don't hear all the ideas, then it's hard for you to think of all the ideas. And if they can control the way people speak out loud, then they can start to control the way you think. So it is important, especially in times like this, to have the courage to speak the truth and not be afraid of the consequences of that. All right, the 10th quote: don't expect to be motivated every day to get out there and make things happen. You won't be. Don't count on motivation, count on discipline. This is a Jocko Willink quote. I like this quote because motivation is like the people who go or have New Year's resolutions to get in shape, right? They go work out for a week or two, the motivation goes away, and then they gain the weight back and don't do anything. Motivation is, for the most part, useless, right? It's be happy when it comes to you, but as a rule, discipline's what's going to get you over the hump. Motivation is not what's going to get you out of bed in the morning when you feel like sleeping in. It's discipline, it's commitment to doing what you need to do, and if you don't have that discipline, you're not going to get anywhere. Discipline is the difference between people who succeed in business and people who don't succeed in business. I saw this thing, I don't want to mention any names, but there's a guy, he's got a ton of people in his social media marketing course, and I heard recently that only about 2% of the people who take the course are successful in the course. So why is that? That's because only 2% of them had the discipline to make it work. They were the only ones committed to making it happen. And the reason for this, I mean, you think about it, 100% of people who signed up for the program were motivated, clearly, right? Because they wouldn't have signed up if they weren't motivated, if it didn't fire them up. He probably had really good sales pages and webinars to convince you it was going to be this great thing to do. And so everybody gets motivated, they join, and then only 2% had the discipline to follow through on it. That's the difference between motivation and discipline. You have to discipline yourself. It is extremely important if you're going to succeed at anything in your life. And too many people's discipline is discipline based on the fear of repercussions, right? Like we'll show up on time to some low wage job because we don't want to get fired, but we don't have the discipline to actually get ahead in life because we don't take enough responsibility for things. Guys, that's all I got for this video. Go over to my Instagram if you'd like. I'm going to start doing on Mondays. Every Monday, I'm going to answer you guys' questions. Go over to my Instagram, leave a DM if you've got a question you want me to answer. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can on Instagram, and I'll pick one per week to do the Monday episode on. Also, be sure to hit the like button if you got something out of this video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I'll talk soon.